Welcome to the Organisational Inclusionist. I'm your host, Grace Mosuro. In this podcast series, we'll be delving deep into the pressing issues surrounding equality, diversity, and inclusion in both the workplace and the broader world. My goal is to foster understanding, inspire change, and amplify the voices of those advocating for a more inclusive and equitable society. Throughout this series, I'll be engaging in candid discussions with leaders, experts, activists, and changemakers from various fields. We'll explore the challenges, successes, and evolving landscapes of equality, diversity, and inclusion. From dismantling systematic biases to promoting equal opportunities for all, we'll touch on a broad range of topics. But we won't stop at discussing problems. We'll actively seek out solutions and actionable steps to drive positive change. Our aim is to inspire and empower you, our listeners, to take an active role in making the world a better place for everyone. This is the Organisational Inclusionist. Let's get started. Welcome everyone to this episode of the Organisational Inclusionist. I am Grace Mosuro, your host, and I am joined today by the amazing Reuben Christian to talk through his role and his work as an edutainer, and also his fantastic forward-thinking business, Dream Rehab. Reuben is working in a co-working space, which is essentially life after COVID, right? So you will see people walking around, you might hear some background noise, but that is life as we know it now. But a massive thank you, Reuben, for joining. I would like to hand over to you because I never feel like I do intros any justice. I want to hand over to you, please. Could you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Firstly, thanks for having me on the pod, Grace. I appreciate that. And thanks for you and your listeners putting up with me in the environment that I'm currently in. But this environment is very dear to my heart, which I'll get to a little bit later on. But yeah, what I do in essence is I'm an edutainer. That is part educator, part entertainer. So think Oprah Winfrey meets Jonathan Ross with maybe a splash of Ramesh Ranganathan, if you understand those references, right?
No.
I've come from the entertainment world. So I started off as a presenter on YouTube, doing like comedy vox pop videos. Then I progressed to hosting stages all around London, all sorts of stages from variety shows, talent shows, comedy shows, music gigs, festivals. Was doing that maybe for about 10 years, 15 years, I think, before I made a switch to edutainment, which is bringing all of that energy and everything I've learned from live hosting, live hosting and entertaining to the world of education. And the strings I've added to my bow there is facilitation and moderation. And even though I was kind of doing that within the entertainment space, maybe hosting a show and then interviewing some people on the panel, I've kind of fine-tuned that skill set in the edutainment world now. And so that's what I do. I bring everything I've learned from the entertainment world and I work as an edutainer in the capacity. So this is what more people will be familiar with, right? So in the capacity of a live event host, a presenter, a comedian, a workshop facilitator and designer, a moderator on panels, and sometimes a coach as well.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's what I do as Reuben the Human.
Reuben the Human, I love it. So we met, feels like ages ago now. I think we met in January when we were both on a Publicity with Purpose kind of monthly coaching thing. And you stood out for a few reasons. One of them being you walked in and I was like, oh my gosh, he's a cute little black man, isn't he?
Oh, wow. I love that. The first time you're going to admit that on your podcast.
Yes,
I'll take that. Thank you. Right.
And then you introduced yourself, and I don't know if you did. I think someone else maybe. Yes, something had happened anyway, and I found out you're not actually black. So what is your your background?
Yeah, do you know what? I get that a lot, man. I get that a lot. It's confusing. I'm confused sometimes. I'm questioning my parents sometimes. Like, you're not telling me the truth. Like, I've got some soul here, a bit more than what our uncles have. But so I'm Malaysian Indian.
Amazing.
So yeah, parents born and bred in Malaysia, but we've got Sri Lankan roots. So Malaysian Indian is the heritage. But I've been brought up in East London, right? And I feel I was adopted by the black community when I was over here. So I've kind of stolen or absorbed some of their isms, which I'm so grateful for. I've talked about this on other podcasts and just generally with people, like how indebted I feel to the Black culture on the come up here for me in the UK, because that has just really infused me with creativity and energy and all sorts of stuff that at the time I wasn't really feeling or getting from the South Asian community. And we talk a lot about it in one of the podcast shows I've got, which is called What is This Behavior? But to answer your question, South Asian, Malaysian, Indian, but brought up in and around Black people around East London and navigating what is primarily a white world.
Yeah.
So mix up, basically.
I love it. And I love what you said about isms. Like, it's so true. Where we live and like the cultures we're brought up around, like we definitely develop isms. So, Dream Rehab, Reuben. What is Dream Rehab?
Dream Rehab is my baby. Dream Rehab is a space where we co-create best lives.
Love.
What it does, it's an event, it's a community, it's a self-development space that harnesses the power of community to help its individuals move towards their goals, be them professional or personal. And I created it simply because I needed it. There was a time, I think 2016, I had such a massive low as an entertainer and as a freelancer. It was just really, really hard. A whole bout of self-doubt came up, and I was unable to, just engage in my kind of like my daily tasks of outreach and just trying to get work. It was just a massive, massive reset. And what I realized is throughout that 10 years when I was doing what I was doing within entertainment, I'd realized I'd inherited ideas mainly from the American self-development space on doing stuff yourself. And also, it's a very, not necessarily toxic, but it's a very old school masculine idea, the idea of a lone wolf, right? You put your blinkers on, you focus, and you just smash it. If you get knocked down, you get up harder. And I was doing that for like 10 years. And then, yeah, one of the lows were just so big that I just didn't have the will or the belief to get back up and go again. And so I started therapy. In therapy, I unpacked a lot about my patterns and why this had happened. And a lot of that was down to isolation, just isolating myself, going blinkered for the dream. So I made a promise internally that I am not doing anything by myself anymore. I mean, to an extent, we have to do creative thinking and we've got our own planning to do as freelancers, right? But generally, how I approach my work is collaborative now. It's totally community focused. It's peer to peer. And Dream Rehab was the first space that I created to allow me to talk about that, to explore that, and to bring other people together and say, hey, you know what? We've got these dreams, but we're all struggling, which humanizes that journey already. And then the second part is, how can we help each other out? And that's the rehab part. So Dream Rehab started off as like a half-day workshop, and then I divvied it up into a curriculum, and then I evolved it into a live show, which allows me to lean into my capabilities of being like an ad libber or a comic and whatnot. And it's just made it fun. The leading question was, how can I take a self-development space workshop and tour with it? Because those things, when you think of tour, you think of music tours, you think of comedy tours. You don't think of transformational educational spaces of tour. I mean, now you're seeing therapists like Esther Perel go on quote unquote tour, which is absolutely great. So it's a kind of similar space. And the live show allows me to tour with an offering that brings community together to get connected and work out how to help them out. I'm super proud of it, man. I absolutely love it. And I'm just trying to, tour it in 2024, but also get different variations of its essence as a different offering into spaces that it can serve. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I think a couple of things. So firstly, your passion comes through. As soon as you said it's my baby, I saw it in your
that's
face.
so good, man. Yeah,
And that's so
I love that.
important as well, because people buy into kind of how, the energy that sits behind what you're offering. And the other thing that came to mind was just like, wow, like it's so needed, so necessary, but the way that you do it is just so innovative. And like in our spaces as coaches and like entrepreneurs, we're always told, what's your unique selling point? Why is what you do different? And yours is so different. Do you know what I mean? And just the way that you deliver it, the story that sits behind it as well, because I think people need to be able to see that you've experienced what you're trying to coach them through as well. But I know that one of the biggest things, or one of the biggest challenges that people from minority backgrounds can have, let me speak for Black people, because that's obviously kind of my identity, but like I know that sometimes in the Black community there is an aversion to sharing information and sharing resources, and collaborating because of a fear, the scarcity mindset that exists. What would you say about that? And is that something you've noticed in other communities? Like, where does it come from, and what are your thoughts on it?
Oh, that's such a great question, man. I don't know if you noticed, but if you play this, but if you didn't just then, you play this back, you would watch my body react in a certain way. Like I had a somatic reaction to the question. There
Mm,
was this big like,
yeah,
it's a mixture of what I think is sadness and frustration, I think.
yeah,
And what came to mind is I used to run Dream Rehab in its workshop format in a space in London somewhere. And I won't say what the space is, right? It was a
mm,
creative community, basically. And I remember going to one of the workshop events there, and some of the founders and founders of the space were there talking. And the founder themselves said something that really, really irritated me and is still stuck with me. And I don't agree with it. But what they said is there isn't enough to go around for us people of color. And I thought to myself, how can you say that to a room of
yeah,
entrepreneurs and creatives of color? What
mm,
you're doing is you're fueling a scarcity mindset
mm-hmm,
that does not breed a collaborative energy. And I
yeah,
thought to myself, I also know now, Grace, that everyone kind of, if they're not aware, they're speaking from their own biases, their own lived experiences, their own
mm,
traumas, and their own pains. So if this person has experienced that through her lens and lived experience, it's obvious that's what she's going to report back because she thinks she's helping.
yeah,
I tried not to say she, but I flopped. It's a she. Um, but I've kind of made it my mission to try to prove that wrong because I don't think it's true. I
mm,
think if more people were either coached or encouraged or taught the art of peer-to-peer networking or peer-to-peer collaboration or how we work as a team, they would feel the benefits and they would keep doing that. And then we'd start thriving together. I'm such a firm believer. I've got real optimism around that, which is why I do what I do with Dream Rehab and I go and create these spaces and give people a tester. You know,
mm,
so with some of my past Dream Rehab like cohorts and attendees, dreamers, let's call them, they've come to the event, they've met other dreamers, usually people of color actually, and they've created what I call growth gangs, and
yeah,
they've kept that gang, that group, and they would meet up regularly and just keep helping each other out, sharing resources, giving encouragement, and then everyone kind of expands that way. I've seen it firsthand. I'm not just an
mm.
advocate of
No, I love that. And I think, what you said about traumas is so true and so important. But I also remember being raised to not speak kind of what's happening in your house and not to
it.
tell people your business and things like that. And that conditioning and the impact that it had on me growing up is like, oh, I'm not allowed to tell anyone what I'm doing, or, or where you've had traumas where you've shared an idea and people have
Mm,
shut it down, or you've shared an idea and someone else has run off and done it, and things like that. But I think something that I've learned as I've grown is firstly, like, no one is you. So, irrespective of an idea that you have, if someone does steal the idea, they can never steal the essence of that idea. And I think the
yeah,
essence is what will make or break an idea anyway. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying, just about hearing that message being given to a room of people by someone, who is a person of color, and the impact that can have on people. But how do we change that? Like, how do we get people feeling? Because there will be people that listen to this podcast and desperately want a growth gang or desperately want to collaborate, but are still scared because
right.
they're anchored by that scarcity mindset. Like, how
Yeah.
do we change that?
Yeah, firstly, I would say if we're just looking at it through a compassionate lens, we're all the way, we are who we are, and we show up in the ways we do because of what we've experienced, right? And yes, I can have my frustrations and be sad and upset that someone is projecting that out into the world, but also there is the other side, which is also true. Like, why has that happened? If someone has tried many times to reach out and connect, and maybe their ideas have been robbed or whatever, which happens a lot in entertainment actually, and people can take it really, really personally, and that's gonna shape us in a certain way. So first thing, I just wanted to extend compassion to anyone that might be feeling like that because it's
Mm,
come from somewhere. And then I think the second thing is evidence, right? And what I mean by evidence is lived experience of the opposite point of view. So if all of a sudden, like if you've experienced a lot of rejection and then all of a sudden you start getting wins, not only do you intellectually understand that wins are possible, but you somatically feel it. You feel it. And when you start feeling it and experiencing it, I think a shift can start to happen. So then I guess the question is, how can we start to feel that collaboration is a better way forward than isolation? It is to very incrementally, going at your own pace, start leaning into collaborative spaces. And as you get more lived experience, more data, more evidence that this is helpful, it starts to shift because our brains are just trying to keep us safe. Do you know what I mean? So more data we give our brain, like our primal brain, to say we are actually safe here, it'll be like, oh, okay, cool, I can calm down now. We're safe here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think lived experience and testing it out
Amazing.
and just moving at your own pace.
Definitely. I think starting this podcast has been so like powerful for me in the sense that obviously I've met so many different and amazing people, but I don't usually put myself out there like this. There is nothing more vulnerable than recording yourself talking and then posting it for the world to comment on or view or whatever. And, you know, for me, that was like really brave. But the main reason that I did that was because of what I'm trying to create with this podcast, which is a space for learning and a space for collaboration. And I think for me, that has been really powerful. While you were speaking, I don't know why, but I just had the phrase like iron sharpens iron, like that came to mind. It's that idea of
100%.
actually like when there are people doing great things and, you know, entrepreneurs doing great things, being around those people is so powerful in terms of what it can create in you and what it can enable you to do as well. So, you know, I know from my experience that that is so powerful, and that in itself is a reason to be more open to collaboration and kind of gradually letting go of that scarcity mindset. But I've also been on the other side of it where I've been so scared to share what I'm doing publicly in case someone with more resources runs off with my idea and does whatever. But I have gradually learned that actually no one can actually really steal the essence of your idea because they will never know the intricate thinking that goes with it. Particularly if your idea is born out of lived experience, people can't replicate that. That's unique to you. So I think that's something that I'd really flag and share. So like in terms of Dream Rehab then,
Yeah.
how has the journey been for you? Like what did the beginning of the Dream Rehab journey look like? And what does it look like today?
First thing I would say, after they're spraying their coffee machines loud as they can, you just wait for that for a second. No, I'm just going to carry on. So what I would say, right, is just like with anything within my career, every time I've stepped into a new space, no matter how many new spaces I've worked through, that conquered isn't a word, but have been able to normalize, there's always the fear that just crops up again. So, right, people would say to me, "Oh, Reuben, man, you do stand-up comedy. Like, you must be fearless. That's the hardest thing in the world." And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting you say that because you're a live singer. To get up on stage and sing live to me is the most vulnerable thing. That's the hardest thing in the world." So what I've learned is whatever space is new to us, there's just going to be fear, right?
Yeah.
And so I was doing stand up and hosting and everything for 10 years. But when I said to myself, oh, I'm going to create a workshop and deliver it, all of a sudden the imposter syndrome went, are you? Who are you? Who are you to deliver a workshop? Who are you to teach anyone anything? You're just a guy that tries to be funny on stage and arguably not even that well. And all of this stuff, I'm up against all of this stuff, right? So the first thing was fear. And I think when I done the first one and I realized how well it connected with people and how valuable they found it, sorry, that's that lived, felt experience of delivering it. And I went home that day, I was like, oh, this feels good. I'm going to carry on. And so the journey has been, I will do what I feel I need and that the world needs. And whenever I feel that needs to change, I don't know where the change would lead me, but I lead with a question like, what would it look like if it was like this?
Yeah.
Or what do I think most people need at the moment? Let's ask them, and then I tweak and change. So it's forever emerging. And with all the projects at the moment, I approach them with an emergent strategy. I don't know if you're that familiar with Adrian Marie Brown's work, Emergent Strategy. But yeah, it's amazing. The top line is we're living in a world that is changing so rapidly. Like we're in a world that is changing faster than it's ever been changing. And now with AI, what they're saying is, I think 2025 is going to be a year that changes so rapidly, and then every year after 2025 is going to be 10x the changes.
Yeah.
So we're going to start a sprint in 2025, and it's going to keep going. How do we prep? How do we prep for that? We can't do a 10-year plan if we don't know what year two is going to look like landscape wise. So the strategy is emergent, meaning we're going to be open. Here's our mission. Here's our North Star, but we're going to be open and emergent to just move with kind of what we need. And that's how Dream Rehab has ended up as a live show, as opposed to just a workshop. Now it's a live show and a workshop, and it can be other things as well. Did that answer your question?
It did. And I think what would be good as well is to get a sense from you, like what keeps you going? Because it kind of been easy getting started. I know you said you had that euphoria from your first like show and like your first, you know, kind of you got the euphoria from the first event that you did and from this work that you're doing. But what really inspires you to keep going, and what are you really hoping to? I know you said like the strategy is emergent, but what keeps you going? What keeps that growth mindset in you for your vision for Dream Rehab?
So I've been clueless as to what I want to do with my life since the moment I left college or secondary, oh no, university. And I just followed the fun, right? If it felt boring or a drag, I was like, this is going to be painful for me. I can't do this. And so I kept switching. And during that exploration time, that's what led me to presenting and comedy and finally edutainer. During that time, I've been doing quite a lot of work on myself, self-knowledge based work, right? So there's a lot of journaling, also therapy. So I have quite a good relationship with my inner world, what my wants and needs are. And yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what would a fulfilling career look like to me. And every time I've done exercises or journaled on it or done a discussion group on it, and then I went back to past notes, it's always pointing in the same direction. So I'm utterly clear at this point in my life that this is what I'm supposed to be doing at this point in my life. Like it just ticks a lot of things for me, which is it's a creative. I've got creative agency over what I'm doing. It's connected to people, which I absolutely love, and it gives me a chance to express myself and perform. You know, like, and it's valuable for the world because I'm a big advocate of community, because I think modernity has lied to us, telling us that we need to be quite individualistic. And that has led to a lot of our suffering when belonging is baked into us as human beings. So let's learn how to lean into that a little bit more. So that's just a few boxes it ticks. And I think knowing that I've tried near enough, not everything, but so much, and they're all dead ends. Like, even if I have a down day, where am I going to go? Do you know what I mean? Like, I found the dream thing. I just have to now keep putting in the work. Or I lie to myself and try and procrastinate and go and do this thing that just feels fun for a little while, but ultimately won't be as fulfilling as this. Yeah, so that keeps me going.
I love that. And I think hearing that is really important, because I think a lot of people can identify with that. You spend all this money going to uni, doing a course, and then you finish and you're like, I'm not sure I want to do this. Don't know what I want to do. And then we run into loads of different things. And I think I agree with you. Like, it's so important. I always say, when I go on holiday, I am usually, no matter how long the holiday is, by like day 7, I'm ready to come home. Even if I'm having an amazing time, I'm excited to get home, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got these great ideas for work. I've got this to do. I've got that to do. And I love my house. And I think it's so important, just from what you've said, to have something that you're doing that feels like more than just a job. Like, it feels like a purpose. It gets you excited. It makes you want to get home from the holiday. It makes you want to get up in the morning. It's not going to be great every day, because even though working with people is amazing, you'll know this as well. Like, people are the most unreliable variable in the world. And there will be some days where it just doesn't go great, because people are people. But the main reason that you started doing that always anchors you, I think, and inspires you to carry on. So it's so nice to hear you say that. Who do you work with then? So do you work with individuals? Do you work with corporates? Who's your customer?
Yeah. So I am building out some offerings for different spaces, right? So when I put Dream Rehab on publicly, it's B2C, business
Hmm.
to consumer. And anyone that wants to work on some sort of dream or they want to expand in a certain direction can come to it. Although it's primarily been creative people, creatively inclined people, working artists, or what I like to call undercover creatives. People
Mm,
that are working in corporate, but they know they want to do some music. They don't want to quit the corporate job to go and tour this year, but they
mm,
just, this thing hasn't left them. It's always saying, I want to, how about me? How about music? How about poetry? How about whatever. So they
yeah.
might come and start unearthing, right? But now what I'm doing is I've created an offering for communities. So wherever there is a community, so at the moment, let's say Soho House Group, right,
Mm,
or the ministry. These are members clubs for the creative world. I'm going in there and running Dream Rehab for their community to just really deepen the bonds of that community and help understand how they can help each other out because there are a lot of freelancers in there.
mm.
And I'm also just working on some offerings for businesses at the moment. But it will very likely be around team cohesion, team building, problem solving as a team.
Amazing. Do you know what? When you were speaking, I actually think there might be a need for your service with like local authority
Yeah, that's
employment teams because
right.
they work with like entrepreneurs in the local community, etc. And this type of provision would definitely help. But then
Yeah.
the other thing that came to mind is franchise businesses
Mm,
where they are owned by corporates, but then they have individuals that essentially manage their own franchises. And they want those franchises to succeed, right?
right.
But those people also are people and they will come with, they will have had some challenges, they'll have imposter syndrome, they'll have all of that. And I can definitely see this adding value as well in some areas like that, particularly for like people working in sectors that are competitive and you only succeed if you're creative. Like how
Mm,
do you encourage that
yeah.
collaboration in those spaces?
Yeah.
Could be quite interesting.
That makes me think of the word creativity. I think a lot of people, when they, because I've done some talks on creativity through Dream Rehab, right? And when I ask the audience what are the first two things that come to mind when we think of artist or creativity, it's colors, it's painters. Do you know, mate? It's quote unquote typical artists,
Mm,
but everyone has creative capacity. It's part of the
mm,
human condition, and we use creativity in every single job, whether you're an accountant or whatever. You're creatively problem solving. So how do we learn how to exercise that creative part of our brain a little bit more so we can use it in whatever space we are using it?
mm,
And there are mechanisms, there are practices that can help people do that.
no, definitely. How do people get in touch with you? So if they listen to this podcast and they think, I need this in my life, like how do they access it?
Yeah, so you can, if you want to get a better idea of Dream Rehab as it currently stands, it's the website is dreamrehab.co.uk. And that's because it's emergent, I'm forever evolving it.
Mm,
So whenever you check it, that will be the latest iteration of the offering to the world. On Instagram, it's Dream Rehab underscore, and you can find me on LinkedIn, Reuben Christian, Reuben, Christian spelled like the religion with a CH. And on Instagram, it's Reuben Christian 1.
I'm going to put all of these links
Yeah, and
in.
my email is rubenchristian@gmail.com. Yeah,
Don't worry, we'll put the right one in. I love
yeah,
it.
perfect, perfect.
And I always like to end these sessions with a bit of a call to action. So for anyone
Mm,
listening, thinking, you know what, I need a bit of inspiration, or I'm feeling blocked, or,
mm.
I don't know where I'm going or what to do. What would be your call to action or advice be for them?
It would be have a conversation, reach out to someone and share what you're currently going through, what you're holding, what you're struggling with, right? I think processing it externally in the safe space of someone else actually helps cycle it through. And you might find that it's not as bad as you initially think it is. Or you might even get some solutions, or you might realize, and this is usually the case, that a lot of other people are going through the same thing. And like we said at the beginning of our conversation, that itself is quite consoling, and might just be enough for you to carry on doing what you're doing as opposed to quitting. So I just think the first thing always is to talk about it. And with Dream Rehab, the live show, the first part is dream, the second part is rehab, right? We don't get into any solutionizing because no one's broken. We're not getting into any solutionizing until we all honestly talk about what's cooking and what the challenges are, so that the whole room realizes that person over there that I think is an absolute G and has been smashing it on Instagram for 10 years is struggling like me. What? And then we go into the break realizing that everyone in here is talented, sovereign in some way, but as human beings also struggling. And I think that is the first thing we all need to understand. And then we get into, okay, cool. Now how can we work things forward, help people out if they so want.
There was something you shared with me a few weeks back about choosing who you share with or who you share ideas with at particular times. Can you, because I can't remember the exact, and I'll butcher it if I try. Can you
Yeah,
explain that to our listeners? Because I think that was so
yeah,
powerful for me as
yeah. Do you know what? That's so great. So I'm gonna just to let you know. I mean, by the time this comes out, I might have already started doing this, but on my Instagram page, I'm just gonna start sharing compassionate ideas for
well.
personal growth. And this is going to be one of them because this is just super, super important. So I think we mentioned the Disney's free rooms.
Yes.
Was that what it was? Right. So Disney's creative process, as far as my research goes, before any film would come out, a Disney-based film or a product or a service or an experience like Disneyland or whatever it was, it would go through these 3 stages. Now, if we imagine each stage is a room, and before an idea can come out on the final stage, it has to, in this order, go through each room, right? The first room is the dreamer's room, the second room is the realist's room, and the third room is the critic's room. And in the dreamer's room, the idea is to just dream with infinite possibility. Do not edit your thoughts. Do not think this is going to work. It's not going to work. Someone might like it. It's just none of your business. That thinking doesn't exist in that room. So we're just going as wide as we possibly can. We're dreaming, we're getting energized, and we're just going ridiculous, like as ridiculous as we possibly can. Once we've got all of that out and we're happy that we've got it out and we're energized, because that's where the energy of the project comes from. Then we move into the realist's room, or the realist way of thinking, or we speak to some realists, depending on what personality type you are. But basically, we're in the space of reality now. Now we're saying, okay, we've got all this wild stuff. This is what we know of reality over here. How can this tie in with reality? So we start getting rid of some stuff, cutting some fat, and being a bit more practical with it, right? And once we're as practical as we possibly can, then we take it into the third room, which I absolutely hate personally as an artist who lives in room one in my head, is the critic's room.
Yeah.
And in the critic's room, the aim is to shoot as many holes at this as possible so that we can repair those and near enough make it failure proof for the real world, like as good as we possibly can. So when you think of the critic's room, think of going up against the dragons on Dragon's Den. You've done all the dreaming. Now you've got it practical, and now you're going to the like super critics that can see all these problems. If you can pass that, thing is ready for market. So that's how Disney would do his project. But how that relates to us is, I think when we're in early stages of an idea, we're in a really vulnerable space, man. So our heart and our soul and our ideas and our creativity is in that room one realm. Now, we can be really excited in that space, but if we then go and chat to someone who as a personality is more of a critic in room 3, or even a practical person in room 2, it can shut our idea down before it even gives us a chance to like get on with it. And then we're like, oh yeah, you're right, I can't see how a 10-year plan is going to work out with this, blah blah blah, and you just don't get any momentum. So I think it's really important who you're asking advice from at different points of your journey. So if you're starting off, I would say definitely keep away from the critics in room 3 for as long as you can.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with other dreamers to kind of encourage you and get the idea up and out. And then when you're ready and you feel resilient enough to start shaping it, maybe bring some realists in. But even those realists, make sure they're sensitive communicators and they're compassionate, because all it takes is a sentence, all it takes is language for you to leave with, to start thinking, oh, shit, man, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Because I just think leaning into something creative and expansive is a really vulnerable act. And yeah, we need to tread sensitively.
Absolutely. I think that was, I know how powerful that was for me, which is why I was like, I've got to get him to share it. But will you share with me the resource that you got that from? Because I know
Yeah,
some people will want to read up on it
yeah, of
more.
course. I mean, what do you want me to? I can email it to you, but if someone just Googles, let me just check it now. The Disney creative process, it would
I'm going
probably
to
come up.
include it as a link in the post so people
Yeah.
can do a bit, because I know I'm a visual learner. So
Mm,
for anyone that's like me, you will be able to go away and do some further reading,
yeah,
and just have a Google and see what else comes up.
yeah.
So no, Reuben, I'm really excited for Dream Rehab. Like,
Thank you.
are you going to be doing more like public things, and like how
Right,
do individuals find you and your events,
right.
etc., and attend? Because I've not been
Yeah.
invited to one yet, so
No, Grace, there hasn't been one on since we've met, so you're good, man.
fine.
So those websites that I've already mentioned, which is Dream
Mhm.
Rehab's socials and then mine as Reuben Socials, you can check it out there. But at the moment, the focus is B2B, right? Business to business. So I'm taking it to Soho House Group in this summer. I'm going to do something at the ministry and probably other maybe co-working spaces and whatnot. But if everything goes to plan, I might get some funding come in within the next 2 months, which will allow me to take this on tour publicly. And I'm
Amazing,
super, super excited by that. We've handed the application in. And if all goes to plan, it'll be London, Manchester, Birmingham for the live show. And the live show is just a slightly different tweak to the community offering because it's a bit more showy. We've got the lights, we've got a DJ, we've got a bit of an open mic segment where we're sharing. It's like, and you can see the videos on the Dream Rehab website on the
mm,
live show part. It's like so heartfelt, man. I love it. So that is probably the public place where it will happen. If not, in the space that you and I met, I'm gonna, yeah, I'm gonna pitch it to those guys as well and see if they'll be
amazing,
up for letting me come and serve the community in that way.
amazing. I think Sama definitely will. So
Yeah,
be looking out for that. Reuben, thank you so much for joining me today.
no,
I have
so good
learned
to,
so
yeah, I wish I'm usually the questioner and I feel like I haven't asked you any questions, but it feels quite odd. But yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
No, I really, really enjoyed it. And I think what you're doing is amazing and is needed as well. And I think it's, I'm really happy that I'm able to bring it to my listeners. So, you know, they have access to you and to what you're doing, and just the amazing knowledge bank that you are as well, based on kind of your lived experience and what you've been coaching other people through. So
Mm.
thank you for the amazing work you're doing. And I hope the listeners have enjoyed it as much as I have. And yeah, I will be keeping an eye and staying in touch, obviously.
Yeah, my friend, no doubt. And big up yourself with this podcast and the work you're doing. I know how hard it is to keep this stuff going. Do you know what I mean? Especially with the things that you're juggling. So
Mm,
yeah, if I can help with anything, we're connected now. We're all community. So you know
exactly.
how I do it.
Thank
Yeah.
you. This podcast is brought to you by Acquaintance Consulting. We'd love it if you could take a minute at the end of this podcast to follow, subscribe, whichever is easier or available for you on the platform that you're listening to us on. We're really keen to grow this channel and really impact equality, diversity, and inclusion across the world. And with your support, we can do just that.